Well, first off, thank Chief and the mayor and Chief Pena and all of these men and women did an amazing job. And it's just, you said it, Chief, it could have been a lot worse. Of course, we're devastated. I mean, we've been here 65 years and have somebody shooting in your church. But, you know, we don't understand why these things happen, but we know God's in control. And we're going to pray for that little 5-year-old boy and pray for the lady that was deceased, her family and all, and the other gentleman. But I don't know, it's just kind of in a fog, but, you know, just believe that, you know, we're going to stay strong. We're going to continue to move forward. And there are forces of evil, but the forces that are for us, the forces of God are stronger than that. Yes. So we're going to keep going strong and just, you know, doing what God's called us to do, lift people up and give hope to the world. Again, I want to thank all these gentlemen because, you know, I can only imagine if it would have happened during the 11 o'clock service. We were in between services going into the Spanish service. So, you know, if there's anything good of it, you know what, she didn't get in there and do a whole lot worse damage. So we thank God for that. He's watching over all of us. And as the Chief says, we're going to keep going strong and bringing hope to the world.
Hello everyone, welcome to This Week in Tyranny, the most hardcore news show on earth. I am your host Konrad Rogoz, welcoming you. It is Sunday, February 18th here, coming at you from Chicago, Illinois. It's episode 63 of This Week in Tyranny. And for episode 63, we have what I'm calling the shadow ban extravaganza. We're definitely going to get shadow banned. We're going to hopefully not get taken off of YouTube. But if we are, I'm going to go out with a bang. Because I'm talking about the shooting that occurred this week, 2 shootings. I'm talking about mass shootings. I'll be talking about ritual sacrifice and even Sandy Hook. So you could imagine that I'm not anticipating to get on the front page or get any sponsors for this. Before even talking about what happened, I'm going to introduce it this way. When you bring this kind of information to people who aren't familiar with how mass trauma events work, they always ask, but who's doing this? Why are they doing this? When you tell people that there's a cabal controlling the world, why are they doing this? Who is it? The problem is, see, people don't get symbolism. They don't get ritual sacrifice. They don't get 9/11. They don't get Columbine. They don't get the Columbia shuttle disaster. They don't get all those being human sacrifice rituals. They're going to ask who's doing this and how. Fair enough, you know, people always ask who did it, what's the motive? But you can't understand the motive if you don't understand the crime. Focus on understanding what occurred first. You have to understand what happened first. So I'm going to break down the symbolic and ritualistic meaning of this Houston shooting and then the Kansas City shooting 3 days later. The key thing to understand is the story itself. It's the symbolism and what it means for the future. Because if the symbolism and the events themselves are coinciding with an agenda that is playing out, that would be important to know, right? Before you even get to who's doing it and why. See, the skeptical mind asks, well, if what you're saying is true, then how did they plan it? How did they coordinate it? Is everybody in on it? How can everybody be in on it? And I have explained this before in my other videos, and I'll probably go over it again at the end, maybe, how it can be done by controlling key individuals. But the point is, if you're watching this and you're skeptical to the concept and the extent of mass shooting rituals and occult sacrifice, or if you are familiar but you want to share this knowledge with other people who are new to it, you should approach it from the position that a natural and social phenomenon is occurring. Something is happening. Okay? And then there's a history and a symbolism and a pattern associated with it. And the patterns and symbols need to be understood first, and then conclusions should be drawn about why it is happening, or what people or what forces are causing it to happen. And then finally, after that, you need to talk about action to stop these events from occurring, right? People get lost in this. People on both sides get lost in this. And this is kind of where it goes full circle. The action to stop these things from happening. I will start the episode by offering my condolences to everybody that was killed, hurt, and generally impacted by violence. The entire point of my work is to end violence and to obtain justice, to get justice done about it. And it pisses me off that these mass shootings happen. Terrorism makes me angry as hell, whether it's a lone nut gunman or it's a government hit squad doing it. And it pisses me off, especially when independent researchers, they get accused for being cold and insensitive. This guy being cold and insensitive for investigating things, while the news and newspapers and politicians, they immediately jump at the carcass. They jump at the chance to exploit the events to make money and advance their careers off of the blood and tears of the victims and the families. So I want to start there. And I also have to say that this deep dive is a real deep dive. So I've tried my best to organize this information well. That's why I'm doing the show on Sunday and not Friday and Saturday. I've tried to make it cohesive, but it's inevitable that I'm going to skip some things, or that some things are not going to make sense right away, or I'll forget things and have to get back to them later. And since the connections are so deep and intertwined, it may not be clear and concise, cohesive at first. But in a way, I have to talk about everything to connect it all for the whole thing to make sense. So I just have to start somewhere. And you may be wondering, like, who am I even to know this stuff? Like, what are my qualifications? I'll get to it. And really, the stuff that I'm going to put forward here speaks for itself. It doesn't matter who's saying it. And all I can say is that there's a clear and rational set of conclusions here. And if you look at the entirety of it, you will see that it is true and simple. Very simple, and I'm nobody special to be doing it. So, a shooting happened at Lakewood Church in Houston, Texas. This is February 11th. This shooting, a woman goes in and opens fire at Joel Osteen's church. Joel Osteen is a celebrity pastor, big famous guy on TV. You probably saw him in the intro laughing. I'll get to him. A woman walks into this church, opens fire. Now, this woman has her child with her. She has her child. She starts shooting, and 2 off-duty cops shot at her, killing her, and then shooting her child, 7-year-old boy, in the head. He, as of now, is fighting for his life still. A 57-year-old man was also wounded in the crossfire, but other than that, no one was hurt. Only the mother was killed, and her son was shot in the head, and then the man was wounded. That in itself is shocking and tragic. And my heart and soul is with that child. And I don't think anyone else in the story deserves any sympathy. And I'll explain why later. But I'm going to dive into the analysis first, and then give background information as I go. It seems the other way around, but this isn't a regular story. What we're getting from the media, from the news, we don't actually know what's true here. All we can do is look at the patterns and symbols, and then go from there. So the first thing that jumps out at me here with this shooting is that we have another female shooter. And this has never been the case before with mass shooters. They've all been male. The only female shooter that I can remember is Aubrey Hale, who shot up the Covenant School in Tennessee. That was last year. And I actually did an extensive breakdown of that event about a year ago. And around that time, actually, Mark Passio was doing an episode about the occult season of sacrifice, right? On his weekly show called What on Earth is Happening. So after this happens, and I was doing that video, I have recorded it, I called into the show, and then he happened to ask me about my findings about the shooting. And I mentioned how that shooting was an homage, was a shout out to the Heaven's Gate cult suicide, mass suicide. And the astronomical phenomenon tied with that cult and their mass suicide was the Hale-Bopp comet, with Aubrey Hale doing the shooting, something like 26 years later to the day, March 26th and March 27th. And lo and behold, Mark pulls up his list of major season of sacrifice rituals in real time, and he had the Heaven's Gate mass suicide there. So I mentioned that not really to flex or, caress my ego. It's just that Mark comes from direct experience with the occult. I don't have direct experience with the occult. And you can see this stuff either way. So that's what I'm saying here. I have no qualifications here, but it can be independently seen with no inside knowledge, and it's not all as crazy as it sounds. And my point here is, a thorough, rational investigation will lead you to these conclusions. if you have the necessary background. Now, if you were to conduct an event like this, if you were planning an event like this, why choose a woman? First, let's talk about why you wouldn't choose a woman. Why has it never been done historically? Well, because the whole point of mass shootings is to get a high death toll, right? We're talking about assuming you wanted this to happen, assuming you were planning it. Now that means expert marksman accuracy, that means complete detachment, a lack of emotions, it means no remorse, also means high level hand-eye coordination, fast twitch muscle response, mental and physical coordination, as well as that long-term strategic thinking and organization. All those things are male traits, right? But when we look at this shooting, it doesn't follow that pattern. And I myself have said before, all these mass shootings, they always go off as planned. No one seems to ever be stopped. No one seems to be foiled, have their plot foiled or arrested on the way there. They all carry out these horrific murders with expert precision. But here, that was not the case, right? The pattern is different. So one would think that this doesn't fit the bill for a ritual sacrifice on first glance, until you consider the significance of the only people shot being a mother and her baby boy, and then also that older man who was wounded. But this is about the mother and the child. And the reason for that is this is the archetype of Isis and her son Horus, right? And also it's about the death and resurrection motif of Osiris. The Egyptian trinity of Osiris, Isis, and Horus is the main pattern here. This is kind of like a spoiler, but I want to, present where I'm coming from here. Now, the ruling class of today, they trace their alleged divine right to rule back to the original Egyptian royal pharaonic family, the god Osiris, the goddess Isis, and their son Horus, the divine child. And their power goes back further to the times of Atlantis, which goes back even further to the more advanced ancient civilizations. Now, that's the occult view of history and evolution. I'm not saying I believe that, but at least in the Rosicrucian and Theosophical schools of thought, that's their view of where man comes from. And that comes from Rudolf Steiner and Max Heindel, if you do want to research some of that for yourself. That's kind of the background I want to start with as I, basically back up my findings. So let's dive right into it. The shooter's name, this mother, her name is Genesee Yvonne Moreno. Now, her name contains the Egyptian trinity within the name. It's like the name Israel contains the trinity as well, Isis, Ra, and El. But Genesee, it's spelled Genesee, but really this name screams Genesis. It reads like Genesis, Isis. And Isis, Genesis, the book of Genesis, is about biblical origins. It's about creation of the earth. It's about the Nephilim, which is, a race of giants that would be, that relates to Atlantis and the ancient civilizations. In Genesis, you have the Garden of Eden story and the serpent. I'll get to all that. And Genesis also means birth. The genesis of something is a beginning or creation, right? It's Genesis. That's her first name. Her middle name is Yvonne. Yvonne comes from the Old Norse Ivar, and the YV, the Eve in that comes from a yew tree. That's the meaning in the Scandinavian language. And the second part of that, the ARR, means warrior or spear. It also means archer. That's where you get the word archer, and it's no coincidence that you have AR-15s that carry out these shootings. But that's beside the point. R means archer. Ivar means archer because bows used to be made out of the yew tree, Y-E-W, the yew tree. So it means both archer and yew tree. Now, about the tree, in early times, the darkly glorious yew tree was probably the only evergreen tree in Britain. Both Druids, with their belief in reincarnation, and later Christians with their teaching of a resurrection, regarded it as a natural emblem of everlasting life. Its capacity for great age enriched its symbolic value. The early Irish regarded it as one of the most ancient beings on earth. Yew is the last on a list of olden things in a passage from the 14th century book of Lismore. 3 lifetimes of the yew for the world from its beginning to its end. The U's reputation for long life is due to the unique way in which the tree grows. Its branches grow down into the ground to form new stems, which then rise up around the old central growth as separate but linked trunks. And after a time, they cannot be distinguished from the original tree. So the U has always been a symbol of death and rebirth, the new that springs out of the old. That's quoting from a website article about, the Druid and Celtic origins of the yew tree. Now, the Fortingall yew in Scotland is one of the oldest living things in Europe. It's a tree in Scotland, most likely the oldest tree in Britain, about 5,000 years old. And this is where Druid priests made their altar, and they would light a fire at the base of the tree on Beltane. Beltane is May 1st. It is the high holiday of Satanism and communism, of the occult in general. And it also is the day that marks the end of the season of sacrifice. I'll tie all of this together. The main idea here is the yew tree is a symbol of resilience and transformation. I'm making a point of that because that's all about the Egyptian trinity, which I'll talk about again and again. It's going to be a long episode, as you probably know if you've clicked on it by now. Now, the Y in Ivan is seen in names like Yvette, Ivona, Iverson. That letter, or that sound, originates from the 13th rune called Iwaz, E-I-W-A-Z. That's from the runic alphabet of the Germanic Anglo-Saxon people. I'll talk about them as well. Now, the name itself, Iwaz, comes from the word you. It's simple phonetically. It's you, it's an E. Now, I'm not a rune expert, but it's clear to me that the reason for this is that this rune or letter represents the tree. And the tree is the link between the underworld and the surface world. And that rune itself is shaped like a stem with a hook on the bottom and then a hook at the top. And that represents the link between lower and higher worlds. You will see the significance of that. Now, from vikingr.org, Norse mythology and Viking history, symbolic meaning of the Iwaz rune. Now let's delve into the symbolic heart of Iwaz. This rune is traditionally associated with the yew tree, a symbol of resilience, transformation, and connection between life and death. It represents the cycle of death and rebirth and the resilience needed to navigate these transitions. That rune is also linked to Yggdrasil, the world tree in Norse mythology, which is often depicted as a yew or ash tree. It's a reminder of the interconnectedness of all things and the cyclical nature of existence. Now, when I read this, I'm like, do I know what I'm talking about or what? Because, it's just started confirming and corroborating really the point of the whole thing. The story is so wild. But anyway, Iwaz, the rune, actually, it relates to a different spelling of basically the same word, Iwaz, A-I-W-A-S-S. And that was a demon or spirit or non-corporeal entity that was that Aleister Crowley saw, the most famous occultist of the 21st century, one of the most famous occultists of all time. That demon, he basically channeled the writing of Thelema. That entity dictated the whole Thelema to him, where he wrote the Book of the Law, which is, one of these main occult schools of thought today. According to Crowley, Iwaz first appeared during the 3 days of the writing of Liber Alva Legis. His first and only identification as such is in chapter 1. Behold, it is revealed by Iwaz, the minister of Horparkrat. Now, Horparkrat, this is from, Crowley's writings. In Egyptian, it's Harpakared. It is more commonly referred to by the Greek transliteration Harpocrates. And Harpocrates means Horus the child, whom Crowley, by the way, I know his name is Crowley, Aleister Crowley. I call him Crowley because I don't respect the man, so if I don't respect someone, I'm going to say his name how I want to say his name. That's beside the point. I like Crowley. So Crowley he considered Horus the child to be the central deity in Thelemic cosmology. Thelema is a big occult school of wisdom, especially in Hollywood and the entertainment industry, and really throughout the occult network. So the point of that is Ivan means you and hunter. Okay? Her middle name means hunter, and Moreno means dark in Spanish. Moreno means dark. So the point is, Ivan, with its etymology, relates to Horus, and Moreno relates to Osiris. And that's because Osiris became the king of the underworld after he was killed. Hence, Moreno of the darkness. He was in the dark. And while the hunter is also a characterization of Osiris, the yew tree symbolizes an old ancestral tree, like Yggdrasil, like the yew tree. And Horus is the divine child of Osiris's ancestral line. And the name Ivan, therefore, contains a reference to him. So, what I'm saying is, her name contains the Egyptian trinity, with all these symbols. And the story of the Egyptian trinity goes that Osiris, the god and ruler of Egypt, he was killed by his brother Set, and then his wife, the goddess Isis, she put Osiris back together and resurrected him briefly through some magic, and he was, sustained long enough for them to conceive Horus, their child. And then Osiris returned to the underworld, and then from then on, she was depicted with her child Horus, with no father, who would later become god and ruler and seen as the sun. Horus is the sun in Egyptian mythology, right? The light of the sun in the sky that rules the world. And this archetype would resurface in Christianity as Madonna with her baby Jesus, right? Now, quick aside, this story and connection is well known, and most people who come across it, they take the position that because this myth reappears with, Mary and the baby Jesus, people take the position that these are symbolic beings, that it's just syncretism of the religions. And people say that the story of Osiris and Isis is a myth and a metaphor, just like the story of Mary and Jesus Christ is just another version of the myth and metaphor. I personally don't take that position. I take the position that these stories replay themselves throughout time with actual living beings over time. So not only do I consider the physical existence of Jesus real, I consider the Osiris and Isis story to have taken place several times again and again throughout human history. These occultists are not playing symbolic games. They're not recalling fake stories. They are taking measures to ensure that they are on the right side of a spiral, circular recurrence of repeating energetic history and recirculating cosmic forces. Okay, that's why they're doing it. So let's talk about Osiris. Osiris was the god and chief judge of the underworld. He was also the god of vegetation and the annual Nile flood, and was closely associated with death, resurrection, and fertility. We've already talked about that like 3 times. So keep that in mind. The ancient Egyptians believed him to be a dead king and a former ruler who was miraculously restored to life after being murdered by his brother Set. For this reason, he came to symbolize the hope for eternal life that every Egyptian held. So, Osiris is the guard that stands at the gate to the afterlife. He is known as the chief judge of Egypt. And this judgment consists of facing the 42 assessors of Ma'at, or the 42 judges. Now, first numerological breakdown, the shooting happens on February 11th, which is the 42nd day of the year. So, the number 42 plays a role here, which we'll see a lot more. And 42 is also a number of fertility. Osiris is a god of resurrection and fertility, yes? Why is 42 the number of fertility? Because it contains the pattern of meiosis, of cell reproduction. You have your 2 sets of chromosomes, one from each parent, and then you have what is meiotic division, where the cells reproduce. And in general, the number 42 shows 2 whole beings offering half of themselves to make a whole new being. That's the story of parenthood. That's what having children is. You sacrifice half of yourself symbolically to make a whole. And Osiris is also associated with the constellation Orion. Now, spoiler alert, Orion is known as the hunter. Hence all that stuff about Ivan and the yew tree and the hunter. The Egyptian pyramid texts say, "Behold, Osiris has come as Orion." That's a little 2000 BC quote from a pyramid text here, just to, give the sources here. We're gonna flex some of our research here, because why not? All well researched. I don't pull none of this stuff out of the dark. I don't channel anything like Aleister Crowley. It's all facts. It's all rational. The three great pyramids, of course, they correspond in proportions to the three stars of Orion's belt, as pictured here. Orion was known as the hunter, like an archer. That's why I mentioned it being a quality of Osiris, right? And more here from the pyramid texts. "Hail, O king, thou art this great star, the bearer of Orion, who ferries the ship of heaven with Orion, who rows the ship of Dewat with Osiris. The king goes forth from the eastern part of the heaven, reinvigorated in his season and fresh in his time. Nuit gave birth to this king together with Orion. The year has adorned thee together with Osiris." So that shows the link between Orion and Osiris. It also says other things, like when they say that the king goes forth from the eastern part of the heaven, they're talking about the rising of a star above the horizon. And for the constellation of Orion, that would be somewhere around December and March. That's when Orion is visible in the sky. And by the way, December is when Sandy Hook occurred, by the way, and March is the official beginning of the official season of sacrifice. More about that later, yeah. And that's where the term Eastern Star comes from. I want to make that point, because Eastern Star is, of course, a name of many occult groups and Masonic organizations and satanic groups. And it doesn't mean specifically that is a star that's in the east, because no star is always in the east, like the sky rotates. So when they say Eastern Star, every star rises in the east. And in older languages, east, the word east actually means rising or ascent, right? Because everything that was in the east was rising. It was in its ascendancy. It was in its rebirth. And the word west meant death and fall and decline. And this is why the occultists identify with the Eastern Star, Ordo Templi Orientis, Order of the Eastern Temple, right? The Eastern Star, the Morning Star, Lucifer, right? All this stuff. Because whether it's the Sun or Orion or Sirius or Venus or Saturn, they want to focus their attention on a star in its ascendancy, because they want to rule. They want to be alive. This is why these events happen mostly around the springtime. The springtime is the season of sacrifice. That's where you make sacrifices, because that's where you try to garner favor for what you want to do in the new year, which is rule and control. You want to be in rulership along with Horus or the dominant cosmic forces. That's why you do these sacrifices in the springtime or the beginning of the year. Now, the occult season of sacrifice is from the spring equinox to the midday of spring, the midpoint of spring. That's March 20th to May 1st. And that's 42 days. The number 42 is going to come up again and again. And this is done every year to refresh the throne, so to speak. Refresh power. It's to always benefit from the creative and life-giving force and energy of the new year. And that's why you also keep seeing women and children getting hurt in these events. The first human sacrifice is in the Bible. Abraham was going to sacrifice. It wasn't the first human sacrifice in history, but in the Bible, it's Abraham that was going to sacrifice his son to God. Now, another tradition is sacrificing a fertile young woman, right? The sacrifice of the virgin. It's about killing women and children, sacrificing the life-giving energy at the start of the life-giving time period. This stuff, it makes sense. It's crazy to do it, but it makes sense why they do it, right? People chase their tail with the gematria, with all these different pulling at strings, the rabbit holes. You have to make it make sense. This stuff makes sense. Remember, this is done by people who have their shit together. Okay? Now, Osiris he was depicted with green skin and making an X with his arms. Now, the color green, why green? One reason is because the aura, the astral body, the aura lights up green when someone has high intellect, right? An intellectual person of high knowledge. I'll get back to that. Osiris was also depicted with a crook and a flail. And that was passed down through history as the hammer and the sickle of communism. A crook and flail is basically what? Like a curved tool that is a bit like the Grim Reaper's scythe. Then the flail, you can see it as a whip, but it's really it symbolizes agriculture. I'll talk about that later. But the point is, these tools that Osiris holds like this with his arms, either he has his hands crossed or he crosses the crook and the flail. This symbolizes authority because it's both the masculine and feminine power, the masculine and feminine aspect of control. It's both dominance and nourishment. The shepherd's crook is a symbol of dominance, of controlling the sheep with the curved, the shepherd's crook. I don't know how to describe it. We're talking about a curved tool that you put around somebody's neck and lead the sheep around, right? And then the flail is used for agriculture. It's not just a whip. Today it's like a whip, but it's actually had a use for separating grains. So now, according to Rudolf Steiner, this green color of Osiris and also the animal heads of many of the Egyptian deities, like Anubis, the jackal head, and all these hawk heads, according to Steiner, these signify that these beings had a memory of the Lemurian epoch, which came before Atlantis, and it was a time where humanity was not as developed as today, and they were actually a lot more snake-like and fish-like, meaning that their bodies were malleable. They were malleable. They were not as solid. And the air of that time was dense and moist, almost like water. And that was like a medium. It was like a cross between fish and the air of today. So it was a medium that gave people, gave that a predecessor of humanity, gave them their perception and their knowledge. You didn't have 5 sense perception like today. You had this one perception that came directly from the medium, from the waters, so to speak. And these humans did not have a highly individualized ego, but they had more of a hive animal mind. And hence the symbolism of the snake throughout history. The snake being a holder of ancient wisdom in the Garden of Eden story. This symbolizes the memory of those times. Now, that's not me, that's Steiner. And the point is not whether or not that's what actually occurred. The point is that these are some of the beliefs of the dark occult of today. And it applies especially today because that dense medium that supposedly gave the people their perceptions and their food, so to speak, this is what the transhumanists of today are trying to recreate today with the cloud, the AI cloud. And that's Elon Musk and friends. What's a cloud? What's the cloud supposed to be? A cloud is a condensation of water in the sky. There are a lot of funny ones out there today from geoengineering. The point is, it's about water, the eternal nourishing element, right? And the transhumanist section of the dark occult, they want to build this exactly. They want to build the cloud. They want to build this, and this will be the medium that gives humans their sense of perception, their emotions, their feelings, and ultimately controlling them by linking their brain with a global artificial intelligence network. David Icke has been saying that for like 30 years. And actually, he just debated this with Elon Musk. Elon Musk called into Alex Jones' show with Elon Musk himself. He started defending this idea. He actually started saying that connecting the human brain to the AI cloud it's good and it's totally fine. So if this sounds crazy to you, you're just not listening to these people, right? It's out in the open. And David Icke has been for a long time ridiculed and laughed at for talking about the rulers of the world being shape-shifting reptilians. I remember the 2006-7 videos of shape-shifting reptilians on YouTube, right? This is like the beginning of conspiracy stuff on YouTube. But when you look at the occult teachings of Rudolf Steiner and others, you get the same thing. These ancient human-like beings, at a stage of evolution where the body was not as solid as today, in a more amphibian-like environment, and hence the green color and the snake symbolism. And the fish symbolism that you get in the Pope's headdress as well, another symbol of ancient power. And, suddenly the reptilian shapeshifting thing doesn't sound as stupid as those two words. And today I consider David Icke to be a highly vindicated person as a thinker and as a researcher. Yeah. So I'll leave that there. Now, along those lines, the church where this occurred is Lakewood Church. Lakewood holds the idea of a tree in water, a tree growing from water up into the land, like the wood in the lake. We talked about the yew tree and the ancestral power throughout man's evolution. And this is what I just talked about, the royalty of the world, tracing their power back to Egypt, to Atlantis, and to Lemuria, to the primordial waters. Yes, that's Lakewood Church. Lakewood Church is located at 9 Greenway Plaza. That's the address. It's in the Greenway area of Houston. Now, what a greenway is, it's a long strip of land where vegetation and slow travel are encouraged. It's like, long strips of land between like industrial stuff where you grow some grass and you want to keep it like a nature walk. That's what a greenway is. And it's all about vegetation, and Osiris is the god of vegetation, who is of course depicted as being green. And the crook he holds is known as the shepherd's crook, again, a symbol of leadership over the sheep. And the flail is used for separating grains from their husks. And both of these are references to the knowledge of agriculture. And that's why Osiris was known as the god of Egypt, because he controlled the food. He controlled the food supply, like today's tyrants. And his woman, Isis, was associated with the flooding of the Nile. So they together controlled seasonal cycles, and therefore they controlled life itself. And this is what the dark occultists of today want. They want to control nature itself. They want to be in charge of the color green, just like Osiris. And the communists wanted the same thing, and so did the Nazis, who I will get to. This church, Lakewood Church, it was founded by Joel Osteen in 1959, Joel Osteen's father. He also was a celebrity pastor. He hosted a TV program that reached millions of people for 16 years. And by the way, the name Joel Osteen, is 42 in Gematria. Remember the 42? We'll get back to that. Let's go into the name. Let's talk about Joel Osteen. Now, that name Osteen, O-S-T-E-E-N. O-S-T is the German word for east. O-S-T means east. The Eastern world was actually known as the Osten, O-S-T-E-N. So his last name means east. And speaking of east, the east is all about the rising of the sun, and the yearly rising, basically, of the solar energy is what? The springtime. And Ostara, O-S-T-A-R-A, that's a pagan solar holiday at the vernal equinox. That's actually the name of the pagan solar holiday around the 20th of March, where the occult season of sacrifice begins. And pagan celebrations during this holiday have themes of balance, renewal, and rebirth. Obviously, right? So that's Ostara. Ostara was also the name of a publication of a man called von Liebenfels. Von Liebenfels was an early Nazi thinker of the late 1800s and early 1900s. Before Nazi was a thing, he was one of the predecessors of that. In 1900s, he formed the Order of the New Templars, a German secret society. And in 1905, he published a book on theozoology, which had to do with the Aryan race, which traces back to Atlantis. And he gives a biblical and historical justification for what is the sterilization of other races. The same year, he founded Ostara, where he published these things. Now, Adolf Hitler was a subscriber of Ostara. Of course, he was influenced by this, and the rest is history, right? Remember, the Nazis also set the Reichstag on fire, which was a false flag ritual. They also enacted strict gun laws, and they also took part in gun confiscation. And they later carry out the Holocaust, which I will mention later. Now, why is everyone seemingly obsessed with the East? Because the East symbolizes rebirth and restoration of power. The Nazis, they wanted to restore the ancient races of Atlantis. So, of course, they called upon the Eastern Star to do that, right? China today also uses a single star. And they're in where? In the old East, right? They're in the Far East. So did the Soviets. You have the Soviet star. The communists in general use a star, a single star, yellow and red. Why yellow and red? Because those are the colors of the sunrise. The Eastern Star being the main star, the sun. It's yellow and it's red, of course, at sunrise. The rulers of the world, they want their system to reign as Horus reigns over the earth. Hence the whole Egyptian trinity. Look, they're just nurturing their divine child. Their system, they think of this as their divine child, the system of slavery and control. And they're preparing him to be the ruler. And where does this happen? The shooting happens in the Lone Star State of Texas. Now, Texas is far from communist, but that's the whole point. They're trying to turn it into communism. That's the battle between the star of humanity, which symbolizes sovereignty, and the star of beast consciousness and collectivism. Yeah. Now, another reason for the symbolism of the East over the West is that the West is Set, the brother of Osiris who killed Osiris. That's why the sun sets in the West. You say you have a sun set. That was the Egyptian name of the god who killed Osiris, Set. And I already said how West means to descend. Right, to send something, to set it down. And the ancient power of the East did descend. Slavery and ignorance did decline in the world. It happened in the times of Greece. It happened in the Renaissance and in the Industrial Revolution in America, right? All in the West. It starts in the East and then it sets in the West. Now, for the dark occult who are obsessed with royal lineage, America is viewed as Set. Us, regular people who have gotten their hands on this occult wisdom like me, to these people who trace their lineage to this stuff, me and these gun owners in America and just free people in general from all around the world who come here to live freely, come from nothing to make something of themselves, we're viewed as Set. We are the evil, jealous brother who murdered Osiris the king. That is how America is viewed. And when that happened, the powers of that time, the authorities, they didn't cry about it. They didn't give up. They rolled with the punches of time. That's what these people do. They roll with the punches. They will take a step back and they will never stop moving forward. They have the boxing style of Joe Frazier. They're gonna get hit in the head 100 times, if so, and they will keep coming and they will wear you down because they will never stop. The old authority of Europe, they took a step back and they went to work. They diluted some of their power. They reorganized, under constitutional republics and representative governments and democratic movements and even reformations. But make no mistake, they never gave it up. The king never gave it up. And unless you cut a king's head off and dethrone them and take the property, they don't give up their power. They could seemingly dilute it. They could put a buffer between you and them, but they do not give up their power. A lineal line of power is an unchangeable fact of nature. That's how shit works. That's how property works. There's only one owner of any property, and that ownership does not move until the owner gives it up or loses it or has it taken from them. That is natural law. And they know it, and we don't. We get caught up in the puppet show, we get caught up in the elections, and we neglect to trace the line of property of ownership. You have to ask, who is the landlord here? Who ultimately controls the land? And you trace that you don't own the land because you pay rent or a mortgage if you pay taxes on your land and you need to get a permit and you don't own the land. So who do you need permission from? The government. So you trace that back to the government, who themselves are renting the land from the international bankers because they cannot fund it themselves. They need money from the international bankers, who themselves derive their authority from the bloodlines of ancient religion. That's the main point here. And another thing about Osiris is he was often depicted as making the X with his arms, as I've said, and with the flail and crook. And the letter X is of huge significance here, because X is the 24th letter of the alphabet, and we are currently in 2024. And Elon Musk owns Twitter now. He bought Twitter and he named it X. He renamed it X, X.com. I talked about Elon. By the way, what does Musk mean? What is a musk? A musk is like a powerful animal odor, right? And that makes me think of that dense, moist air of the Lemurian time period before Atlantis, before that, of the occult Steiner and von Liebenfeld's school of thought, right? Not that I want to even use Steiner and von Liebenfeld in the same sentence. Steiner was denounced by Hitler, and while he took some of his ideas, Steiner talked about freedom. So if you don't know Steiner, I'm not saying they try to blame him from that Nazi ideology, but it's nothing of that sort. The point is that dense, moist air is there when I see Musk, and also that harks back to the animal hive mind. Remember, the AI cloud is going to be that animal hive mind. That's going to be the Musk in air. Okay, that's what I see in the name, Elon Musk. And we have Twitter or X. And at the same time, the WHO is warning people of what? Disease X. And I have said that 2023 was the year of creative potential and laying the groundwork for stuff, because of the relation of the number 223 to 5, to the golden ratio, to the number 1.618, to the Fibonacci spiral. That's 2023. The year 2024 has to do with building. It's a linear masculine number, 2024. 2 by 2, 2 by 4. It's construction language. You have 24 hours in a day. That's a solar, material, masculine number. Year 2020 had to do with vision. You have 20/20 vision, and 2020 is like a mirror. 20/20. That is like the blueprints of something, or the building plans, where the plan is laid out on paper for the upcoming construction. And 2024 is when the building actually begins. And here's an image that a dear friend sent to me, showing the connection between year 2020 and year 2024, especially in the realm of sports and entertainment. You have Chiefs and 49ers in the Super Bowl. Same result, Lamar Jackson winning MVP. 49ers beating the Packers in the playoffs, of course. All these different curious things, mainly having to do with the NFL and some American sports, right? Also, Billie Eilish winning Song of the Year. And then, of course, COVID started in March of that year. 2020 was the lockdown. And then you have COVID Part 2 starts in March, ? Here at the bottom right. Now, 2020 was indeed the year of blueprints, right? Where the pandemic shut the world down and implemented censorship and global obedience. And this graphic theorizes that this disease X is coming in March. Now, whether it is or not is not the point. The point is that this shows that 2024 is the year of building upon the groundwork of 2020. And while these sport connections are ultimately meaningless in the main scheme of things, sports don't matter. Well, they do matter. The world of sports is powerful because that is where the attention of most men today is. That's why it matters. People don't get that we are the engine and the fuel behind these rituals. Because of the distractions that we imbue our time and care and attention into. This is why it does matter that the Chiefs beat the 49ers in the Super Bowl this year, just like in 2020. And that's why the election will be a repeat of 2020, Biden versus Trump. That's what it's looking like. And that's why the halftime show is where all these occult symbols are being sent out into the world. This stuff does matter. The Super Bowl commercials and messages, they set the tone. And they influence the minds of the people. They influence thought itself for the new year on a collective scale. That's why the Super Bowl is always when? Around Groundhog's Day, February 2nd, or Valentine's Day, the 14th. Because the first has to do with prognostication of the coming springtime and the year in general. And the second has to do with love. the most powerful force of life, what everyone cares about the most. So you see, that's very connected to the Super Bowl, and it's connected to the halftime show itself. And who did the halftime show this year is Usher. Now, to usher something means to bring it in, to usher it in. And this is about the ushering in of a new age. And the word usher, it really means gatekeeper. An usher is an officer or servant who has the care of the door of a court, hall, or chamber. That's Osiris. That's Osiris who guards the gates of the afterlife. That's the role Usher plays in that ritual, and it's all a big allusion of Atlantis, to Atlantis. Now, Usher is from Texas, but musically he originates from Atlanta. That's where he became famous, and Atlanta, of course, bears the name of the city of Atlantis, right? Atlanta is Atlantis. And who else was there at the halftime show? It wasn't just Usher, it was Lil Jon, it was Ludacris. These are prominent rappers of the mid-2000s who represented Atlanta. They're all about A-Town, Atlanta, the ATL. And in the 21st century, actually, Atlanta has taken over completely as the capital of hip-hop and rap music. Whereas, since the birthplace of hip-hop in America in the 1970s, the capital was always New York. And this has to do with the coming New Age being a return to the Atlantean age, where the dark occultists trace their power. And the dark occultists believe in the New Age too. They're New Agers too. Big surprise. Except they believe in actually building it. They don't believe in meditating about it or praying for it. They believe in building it. And that's why, Usher did the halftime show, and he symbolizes ushering in the new Atlantean age. And this was a curious moment that I caught. They ended the halftime show with this sentence. They did it a cappella. They repeated it several times. This is the final words of the show. They were saying, I turned the world to the A. I turned the world to the A. And on the surface, that means that they turned it into Atlanta. They made Atlanta influential and famous, right? But of course, there are deeper meanings. I turned the world to the A. It calls back to the Aiwass rune, the Aiwass rune, right? To Aiwass, the demon that Aleister Crowley channels Thelema from. And remember, the I in Ivan, Aiwass, that's all about the hunter. So I turn the world to the A means I turn the world over to the hunter. Turn it over to the I, the YV, the Ivan, the U tree. The tree of renewal and reincarnation. In that sense, not turned it into, but turned it over to. That's just one meaning. If you think that's nothing, fine. Another meaning is that A is the first letter. And this is the idea of reincarnation, of rebuilding Atlantis, of reincarnating Osiris, to go back to square one, A, the first letter, and to establish the ancient rule again. And it's actually tied into the letter X, the 24th letter, because X is a mirroring of the letters A and V. So you have A the first and V the 22nd, and you add 1 and 22 to make 23, and then the combined form is X, the 24th letter. And indeed, X marks the spot, right? 24. Another thing contributing to consider as a significance of the year 24 is that we have the solar eclipse on April 8th of the year 2024. And that's a twin solar eclipse with the one that occurred on October 21st, 2017. And those paths of the eclipse, this is a rare astronomical event. These eclipse paths make an X right in the middle of the country, somewhere between Kansas City, Houston, New York, and Atlanta. Not that those cities have any significance, right? It's somewhere around the southwestern border of Illinois and Missouri. Now, in ancient times, the eclipse was revered and feared, and it was thought to be an omen on the king, right? Because the ruling sun in the sky would actually go black, right? So that's bad luck. The eclipse is all about bad luck. The stars come out, the crickets come out, and this actually was one of the reasons for the killing of the king ritual. And that's an ancient sacrifice ritual, human sacrifice ritual, that I talked about before. And in modern times, the deaths of Kennedy, of Michael Jackson, of Elvis Presley, and Kobe Bryant are just some of the examples of an actual killing of the king ritual in modern times. In ancient times, it was known as the Assyrian substitute king ritual. In the Assyrian substitute king ritual, they would take the king, put him into hiding, and then basically give a stunt double, sacrifice him, kill him, and then through the Assyrian belief, the king was basically free of the bad omens because the king did actually die, but it wasn't him, and then the king could rule on. That's where it comes from. By the way, Elvis, he died at 42. He was the king of rock and roll. Kobe Bryant, he wore the number 24. His nickname was the Black Mamba. That's not Osiris at all. A black snake. That's not Osiris. He played for the Lakers. And this shooting was at Lakewood Church on the 42nd day. 42, 24. Michael Jackson then was the king of pop, right? And John F. Kennedy was called Camelot. And that's a reference to King Arthur, as I've said before. Another king, and then Robert Kennedy happens to run for president in 2024. 42s and 24s is what I'm getting at here. And since we're talking about numerology, let's build on it. The gematria of Osiris, the name Osiris, is 78, which reduces to 24. The gematria of Kennedy is also 78, reducing to 33. Now we talked about 42 and 24. Also the name Joel, as in Joel Osteen, is 42. Now 33 in Kennedy's name, I've said before in my shows that 33, the number, represents transformation, transition, and a vertical ascent. You know, our spine has 33 vertebrae. Water thaws at 33 degrees. 33 degrees is the honorary degree of Freemasonry, Scottish Rite Freemasonry. And that's 33. Kennedy was killed on November 22nd. That's 11/22. 11 plus 22 adds to 33. The name Osteen in gematria is also 78, reducing to 24, right? Joel Osteen, this is his church. And as I said, 24 has to do with the sun, since there are 24 hours in a solar day. Atlantis also reduces to 24 in gematria, right? It has a value of 96 without reduction, and Atlanta has a value of 69 in gematria. So you have the 96 and the 69. The 6 and 9 facing opposite ways also suggests death and rebirth, right? That's why the eclipse in 2024 matters. Now, I don't like talking about numerology that way because a lot of people pull at the strings of gematria and they're not making sense. And when you start talking about these numbers and adding them up, it's, you know, you could really lose the plot with this stuff. And to somebody who's not steeped in numerology, you lose credibility talking about the numbers like this. You think back to movies like Pi and, you know, A Beautiful Mind, and these geniuses who basically lost a grip on reality because they got stuck in focusing on the codes, the code embedded in existence itself. Where this differs is there's a clear historical, symbolic, ritualistic plot and plan and reoccurring theme that matches with the numbers. What makes this different from other people's work who just focus on the numbers is this actually makes sense. Who's doing it, why they're doing it, and what is the significance. Okay? So, you know, I'm not going to run from that. The eclipse, as I've said, it matters because whether you see it as Isis shielding Horus, you know, Isis, if you associate it with the moon is what, you know, causes the sun to go dark. Isis shielding Horus, or Osiris, the darkness obstructing Horus. Whether you see it as Set killing Osiris, whether you see it as Horus being defeated, and hence you have the killing of the king and new beginnings, you can rest assured that the kingmakers of today, the occultists, the kingmaker occultists, are taking advantage of the ritualistic and energetic potential of these occurrences. Whether or not the eclipse means anything, there's a potential there, and if there's a potential, these people who want to hold on to their power are going to build on that, and they're going to implant themselves into the story, because these are the stories of triumph and resurrection throughout history. And on top of that, 2024 is 44. 20 plus 24 is 44, and the number 44 has to do with resurrection in a different way. The number 4 means door. It means to and from, and the heart chakra links the lower world to the higher world within us. The heart chakra is green. It's the color of nature, right? The heart is all about love and life force, and that is the force that makes a birth happen. So the number 4 is like a doorway. It is like the umbilical cord. Number 4 is like the intersection of the lower and higher aspects of man. So 4 represents birth and death. Either one, it represents the doorway crossing over. So 44 is like this portal. 4 is doorway, birth and death. And that's the whole story of Osiris, resurrection again. Osiris in Gematria is 89. And Enrique, the name of the father of the child that was, the father of the baby boy that was shot in the head, is 89. Osiris and Enrique both had the 89. Enrique's name reducing to 44 in Gematria. So, since I mentioned him, the father, Osiris, let's talk about him. Let's talk about the boy. His father is Enrique Carranza. Enrique Carranza comes from a Jewish family, which I'll get to. He is currently actually in jail in Florida for failing to register as a sex offender. He was convicted of attempted sexual assault on a child in Colorado, which means at least the victim was under the age of 15, and he was at least 4 years older than the victim. And I say that because his mother, the mother-in-law of the child, has his mother-in-law. She has tried to claim that this comes from an old statutory rape case, and she tried to paint the issue as not pedophilia, which I'll get to. I have to say this now. This was an extremely dysfunctional family, with the mother, Genesee Moreno, seemingly neglecting her son. It has come out from multiple sources that she referred to her son as the boy or the child, which is alarming in itself, right? It screams human sacrifice, right? It's like you're cultivating someone for them to be hurt, right? Whether that's true or not, who knows? But the psychology does actually make sense to me, because she clearly hated her ex-husband, and so often with these ain't shit women, they project their hatred onto the child, and they hurt the boy as a way to hurt the father. And apparently she was a practicing Muslim, and of course her ex-husband's family is Jewish. As I've said, there's that, and in general it's clear that she was deeply disturbed. She was arrested several times for various crimes, and in her most recent run-in with the law before Sunday's shooting occurred in 2022, when she was found in possession of 2 guns during a traffic stop. She also had schizophrenia and mental health hospitalizations. I previously said, by the way, that these individuals who are in and out of psychiatric care and incarceration, they are often put under Manchurian Candidate programming, or MKUltra mind control. But that's beside the point here. This was a horrifying marriage and parenthood, and articles have come out about their divorce proceedings in 2015. The husband has said that she was a drug user, and then after becoming pregnant, she became abusive. In those documents that, Fox 13 uncovered, he called her Jeffrey. She had used the name of Jeffrey Escalante, which suggests that that she had a male identity. And some people have pointed out the transgender angle here, which has actually been fact-checked, and they've said in the fact-checking that Genesee Moreno was not transgender. That's interesting that they would know that already and make a point to correct that. Because of course, Aubrey Hale from the Covenant shooting was transgender as well, right? And interestingly, an alter ego or a fractured identity is a quality of MK Ultra or monarch mind control. But the transgender angle did not get emphasized in this story, in my view, as to not decrease any sympathy, to not add too much confusion, and really not to take away from the mother aspect, which I have talked about. The mother aspect is key here, as I've said with Isis, the goddess and the child. Now the mother, on the other hand, she said that she was threatened, that she was followed. She talked about, the father's shit on him. It's all one big shit show with this family. It's nothing like Isis and Osiris. And in fact, that's intentional, because this is a total desecration. There's a total desecration of the family, of the bond between men and women, and a demoralization of America going on, of the Western world in general, of family values. That's why it played out this way. That's why it plays out in a family like this. Now, as I said in the beginning, my heart is with the boy, whose name I haven't spoken yet, for a reason, because I will dive into his name now. His name is Samuel Carranza, or Samuel Carranza Moreno. He was born premature at 6 months old. His father had said that he was born with drugs in his system, that his mother was an addict. And on top of fighting for his life, he seems to have been neglected and abused by his mother. That's clear. His father told the court that he didn't see Samuel again until he was 3 years old. And to quote from an article that quoted him, he said he was horrified to learn that the boy was in a near feral state, unable to talk, prone to anger, and still relying on a feeding tube to eat. So that will be a mix of, part of this is just, we don't know the health complications from him being born premature, and we don't know what part of that is the neglect that he was experiencing. But quoting him now, he didn't speak at all. He exhibited violence. I mean, you'd pick him up and he'd hit you in the face, Mr. Carranza told the court, the father. He's just making noises and I'm saying stuff to him, but he was at least, trying to say words. Now, terrible, but this is from a parental court hearing, so who knows if it's true. And I certainly won't give a sex offender the benefit of the doubt, right? But very sadly, I am inclined to believe that a lot of this stuff is true. Child neglect, child abuse, and child sexual abuse is what will bring the West down in the end. The destruction of love, the destruction of care, and the destruction of the family is going to be what kills freedom. Because there's no way that people will be free and happy in the world. They will not be universally allowed to be free and happy when so many children are tortured this way. And I take child abuse and child sacrifice right back to the dark occult royal bloodlines, because child sacrifice and pedophilia is a signature of the ancient religions, the satanic dark occult practices that are essentially a rebellion against nature. And one religious ritual of child abuse that is alive and well today is called circumcision. And that takes us right to the baby boy's mother-in-law. That's Rabbi Wally Carranza. Rabbi Wally Carranza. Now, I've noticed that people are afraid to use the word Jew nowadays. People are afraid to say Jewish. I don't play that game because I have no prejudice or guilt within me. I have nothing to be fearful or scared of. I'm all about the destruction of prejudice, and I'm not really going to grovel about how not anti-Semitic I am. Wally Carranza, the mother of Enrique, the incarcerated convicted sex offender, she has posted the boy Samuel on Facebook and sharing tragic information of his struggle to stay alive. Now, quickly I have to say that for those who maintain that these events like this are contrived, these images, along with Wally Carranza, you could read her Facebook history, they indicate somewhat convincingly that these are real people. And long story short, it's not quite Sandy Hook, right? So keep that in mind. These are rituals that require real blood. In case I forget it later, I have to give credit to Peggy Hall, because that's initially who covered the story. This is the reason I've done it now. Her initial coverage, such as seeing Joel Osteen laughing and all of this. I just want to give credit because she inspired me to do this video. And while my research about, you know, the whole Trinity and all the stuff I'll get to later is mine originally, I think I should give credit for that. I think I should give credit to Mark Passio for really showing me the occult season of sacrifice. I have known about ritualistic sacrifice before, but not the seasonal aspect of it. So, you know, there are more people to credit, but I just want to give credit there. It's not just me who came up with this, right? So, there's that. Back to what I was saying. Let me be very clear that I have no sympathy at all for Wale Carranza. My heart is with Samuel and Samuel only. Carranza is all over Facebook saying repeal the Second Amendment. Quoting, I quote, repeal the Second Amendment, exclamation mark. The first means too much to allow the second. Basically, she's attempting to say that the right to life indicates the right to a kind of life where only the government is armed. Kind of the way it is with Israel. Where there are two classes of people, right? There are people like Wale Carranza, those who are free to prosper, the Jews, and those who live in a concentration camp, the Arabs. And it's not about religion. There's a whole religious aspect to this, that Genesee was a Muslim and she had a Palestine sticker, you know, on the gun. And the husband's family being Jewish. It's not about that. That's not actually significant. But what is significant is there are two classes of people developing. Those who are going to be aligned with the ruling classes, and they are going to be aligned with the transhumanists and the new medical tyranny, and then there are going to be the subhuman 99% of the human population. That's what I'm getting at in a clumsy way. In a not so clumsy way, I want to say that I think Wale Carranza is garbage and trash. There's my classic condemnation, my ultimate condemnation of a human being who really ceases to be seen as a human being. In my eyes, I see them as garbage and trash. And the reason is she defends her daughter-in-law, the abusive mother. She defended her son and his sexual crimes. She defends the off-duty cops who shot Samuel, attacking only individual rights and freedom. She doesn't care about the Jewish people in Germany and Poland in the 1939 and the 1940s who were disarmed by the Nazis and killed. She doesn't care about the kids in Palestine. She doesn't care about the kids being abused by the rabbis, but she for damn sure cares about those American kids and to make sure that they don't have access to guns. That's for damn sure. Just because a tragedy happens to you, and she is a human being, and there is compassion there. It doesn't matter at a certain point if you're advocating for what is going to become global slavery. I cease to feel compassion for you. I direct my compassion to where it is truly needed, the children. Okay? So, on that note, let's dive into the name Samuel. So, the boy's name is Samuel. The biblical Samuel is famous for being a kingmaker. He was known as the great judge of Israel. Funny, because Osiris was known as the chief judge of Egypt. The great judge of Israel means he was the source of spiritual and moral direction, because God spoke to Samuel through direct revelations, right? But the elders of Israel at the time asked Samuel to appoint a king, because all the other nations had kings, and Israel was under the threat of military conquest, so they wanted to install a king like all the other countries. So he then, his greatest distinction, Samuel's, became his role in the establishment of a monarchy in Israel, a worldly king in the nation of Israel. He appointed Saul as king, but then he denounced Saul when he was the king, because in wartime, when Saul was in a situation where he was basically surrounded by enemy forces and he was in a jam and Samuel was nowhere to be found, he, in desperation, decided to make a burnt offering, a sacrifice to God. so that he would somehow be saved. Like, we're talking about human sacrifice here, but whether it's human or animal, we're talking about the act of sacrifice. This is the whole story of Saul, and the Hebrew word for this sacrifice is haolah, actually. This is where the word Holocaust comes from, right? So we're talking about the biblical Israel, we're talking about the Holocaust, we're talking about human sacrifice. It's all tying together here. It may not be so clearly tied together, but I need to talk about all of this, right? And it's all going to make sense. This is where the word Holocaust comes from, and the root of that word is olah. And olah actually means ascent or staircase. This is because a haolah, or sacrifice, consisted of laying someone out on an altar, laying an animal or human being on an altar, setting them on fire, and the fire and smoke then ascends to the heavens, symbolizing the soul being offered to God. The soul itself leaving the body when the being is burned. And Samuel denounced Saul for this, and then later he selected David as the future king. And the idea of a kingmaker is, of course, something that the occult ruling class identifies with. They're the kingmakers, meaning they're the ones who possess occult knowledge and follow the trends of the world, and they conduct these symbolic rituals, reenacting history, and they're the kingmakers. They're not the kings. They're never put in front of the people with a crown. They're behind the scenes. That's the significance of Samuel. And this boy who was shot in the head, who lived a painful and who continues to live a painful and difficult life ever since he was born, he bears the name of Samuel the Kingmaker. So what is the symbolic meaning of that? For the symbolic meaning of it, you can look at it in different ways. Now, I just explained that the occult identifies with Samuel because they're the hand behind the scenes. They're the puppeteers. The puppet masters. Because even after Samuel's death, he prophesies. Even after his death, that's one way. Even after this boy dies, his role as a prophet of future kings in the same year as we're about to have this election in 2024, that's one way to see it. Another way to see it is that they want to remove the archetypal Samuel out of their way. Because Samuel was actually faithful to God, and he judged Saul for his immoral behavior, because they were not allowed to do sacrifices that God didn't allow them to do at the time. So those who hold the hidden power of the world, they trace their origin of power, as I've said, the ancestral tree and the origin of power to the first king. So who's the first earthly king of the nation of Israel? That's Saul. He was the first king of Israel. And it's because of Samuel's visions, right, and his words, that he lost his power. So if Samuel were to be historically eliminated, then Saul would seemingly be free to practice his immoral sacrifices and do all the corrupt things that later he would do, right? I personally view the second version as more likely, but it's not really all that significant. The significance is that these names all point to the same ancient themes. Samuel, a judge, just like Osiris, a kingmaker. His mother, Genesis, which means Genesis, which means Isis. Genesis is the first book of the Bible. It talks about the creation of the earth, the creation of man, and the history of power on earth. The first instance of human sacrifice is Genesis chapter 22, with Abraham being told by God to sacrifice his son Isaac, right? The first animal sacrifice is Genesis chapter 8. This is after the flood, when Noah sees the waters receding out of the ark. He immediately makes an altar and makes animal sacrifices, right? Now this is the same flood that wiped out Atlantis, right? The flood. Remember, this current power structure, they see their power as originating from Atlantis and before. So you see the story, the roots of sacrifice itself being all intertwined here. By the way, the official report says that the mother and Samuel entered the church at 1:53 p.m. Samuel Carranza is 153 in Gematria, and that's, 153 is a big number, right? So like the 24s and the 42s, you look at the fact that there are 26 letters in the alphabet, and the fact that 5 or 6 words add to the same number, it may not be that impressive. 153 is impressive, right? It's 153 in Gematria, and the number 153 is in the New Testament, in the book of John, in a story where Jesus catches 153 fish in a net, where Peter, the master fisherman, couldn't catch any. This is a well-known story, and in that story, Jesus asks Peter 3 times, Peter, do you love me? 3 times he asked this. And he uses the word philos twice and the word agape once. It's the 3 Greek words for love. They're actually eros, philos, and agape. Now in this one, he doesn't use the word eros because eros is romantic love, like between a man and a woman. I suspect that in the original text, they did use the word eros, but of course it was taken out of, I think it would be taken out of the Bible because it wouldn't make sense because to somebody who didn't understand the symbolism, the actual allegory, they don't understand that he was not talking about man love, homo love. He's talking about the 3 aspects of love, right? Eros, philos, and agape. This is because in this story, Jesus was teaching him about the 3 aspects of love within us: the romantic, the familial, and the spiritual. And that 3 is the divine trinity. And here we have not only the Christian trinity, but also the Egyptian one. Now, in episode 51, I talked about how 51 is the number of love. That's my claim, and I've explained it before, and you could go back to it. And 51 times 3 is 153. And that's why that number is the number of fish that Jesus catches. And to my knowledge, I'm the first person to make that connection, like in history. Biblical scholars have essentially given up on the meaning of 153. Maybe there are plenty of occultists who know this, or esoteric Christians who know this, but to my degree, like in my research, no one knows what 153 means. And by the way, I'd like to give a warm hello to my dad watching this. He called me today. I had to tell him I was busy, but I'll give a shout out and a warm hello in this episode. I told him this about the 153. I told him about the 3 aspects of love, and 51 times 3 and 153. Actually analyzing the Greek texts and all of this, so for my dad, I love you, and look, your son is talking about Christ and love after all. Isn't that funny? So, and of course to my mom as well watching this. To my mom, you should know that you made it possible for me to become the man that I am. And there's no need to go to the Trinity of ancient Egypt, because the divine Trinity is within us all. And even us who have come from broken homes, and worse, people who have come from totally traumatic upbringings, we all have a chance to make it right. To make it right for our future children, the future Trinities. So that's why this wasn't your classic mass shooting with a bunch of deaths, because it was about the family. This is all about the family. Another reason for playing out this way, not just the family and the Trinity. Another reason is that the 2 off-duty cops preventing the bloodshed, one of them was named Moreno, by the way, he was named Moreno, them saving the day here, this increases the faith in institutions. It increases the faith in police. And that's part of the rebuilding of 2024, to rebuild the faith in earthly institutions like the police and military. That's what's important right now for the ruling classes. It's guns for cops, since they know how to use them, they're responsible. No guns for the people, because they're mentally ill and they're crazy and they're irresponsible. That's your story here. That's your moral of the story. You're immoral. Another aspect of this is the Hispanic cops saving the day at a Spanish language church service. This is 50,000 Spanish people there, right? No, maybe not. There weren't that many there because it was in a period of transition, but the people that regularly attend this church in Texas, near Houston, a lot of Hispanic people. This is to get the Hispanic people bought into the gun control agenda. Remember, it's not just ritualistic, to all these sacrifice events, there are multiple reasons, and this is the part that I want to mention, the occult web of control. There are multiple reasons on multiple levels, aspects of society that benefit from these mass events. You have the ritualistic, you have the federal and state power, like government, like their gun laws. There's the money that is going to go to the foundations, and you also have, this straight up political, in a political sense. By the way, there was a new mayor here. There's a new mayor that just got sworn in Houston, and this is actually Peggy Hall who has pointed this out. Like, she also pointed out that when you had the wildfires in Lahaina in Hawaii, you had a new governor, Josh Green, a new chief of police in another event. Oftentimes you have these new mayors, new chiefs of police, new leaders at this time, and with them presiding over such an event, they come into prominence. There is an aspect of these people who, for whatever reason, whatever their level of involvement is in these occult orders, I would say satanic orders, this is kind of like they are having a favor done for a favor that they have done in return. They are being exalted. Whoever presides over these events is going to become a prominent figure, as with Governor Josh Green. These guys are speaking to the United Nations and all this. They are profiting off of this. There's a lot of profit in it. And that's the occult web of control. It's not just these voodoo, black hooded robe guys talking about ancient stuff. There are various forces here. Just a quick example about 9/11, you not only had all of the reasons for domestic surveillance, the war in Iraq, the military-industrial complex, okay, the ritualistic aspect of it, domestic surveillance, but also you had the $1 trillion or whatever the amount was that was gone, that was unaccounted for a day before September 11th, right? All of this, I really should have refreshed my memory, but I don't want to spend time on that. I'll go back to this. The point is, multiple facets of the control structure benefit from this, and this one is the Hispanic population buying into the gun control agenda, because it has just come out that the Spanish population now makes up the largest population in Texas. Look, this is who's voting in the local elections, and this is the demographic for whom tomorrow's legislators will cater to. And when the folks who speak Spanish, they are close knit, they get together, you better believe they will remember that their church getting shot up. You don't need to kill 20 people. As with Americans, it seems like Americans are very desensitized to things. They don't need to have a high death toll to shake this population up. They will remember this church getting shot up, and you better believe that at least 50,000 of them are now switching to be intensely anti-gun. Okay? And there's more to all this. I could do an 8-hour version of this. This is really a condensed version. But the last symbol of this that I want to touch on is the number 11. 11 is the justice card in the tarot. That's the significance of the number 11, because justice is the force that rules the universe. That's natural law. The dark occult wants to be this force. They want to be the judge on the throne, like Osiris. That's why this happens on February 11th. That's why the Twin Towers fell on September 11th, on the 11th. This happens after the 11 o'clock service, before the 2 o'clock service. The gematria value of Isis is 56, which condenses to 20, which is the number 11. And Isis is the High Priestess card in the tarot. She represents truth. She is really at the right hand of the king of justice, of natural law. So she represents truth, and the justice card represents law. That's why my channel is called Truth and Law. It is these two cards This is the divine union. These are the two pillars of the number 11. This is what it is. And 11 adds to 2. These are the two forces, okay, that rule the universe. So card 2, card 11, and this shooting happens on 2/11. Okay, from 2/11 to the vernal equinox to March 20th, the beginning of the occult season of sacrifice. From the day of the shooting to that day is 38 days. That's also 11. 3 plus 8 is 11. Now in the church, in the actual church where this happened, you have, where you walk into the church, you have the line, the Bible quote from Jeremiah 29:11. You reduce that, it's 2:11, right? 2 plus 9 is also 11. Houston in Gematria is 112, right? 112, 211, 211 again. I mentioned the Palestine sticker. The word Palestine is 101, 101 in Gematria. That's another 11, reducing to 38, right? You got your 11. And the alias, the male alias of Genesee Moreno, the mother, it was Jeffrey Escalante, right? She went by the name Jeffrey Escalante. By the way, Escalante means like escalator, right? It's about the ascent, and I've talked about the ascent and all that about the east, right? ES, Escalante. But that value in Gematria is 155, which 1 plus 5 plus 5 is 11. 11 to 11, on 2/11, February 11th, 2020, right? 4 years ago to the day, that is the day that the World Health Organization officially named the coronavirus outbreak as COVID-19. That's when the name COVID-19 comes out. And I broke down the meaning of the word COVID as being, COVID-19 as being subjecting the sheep, right? This is from February 11th. More than 42,000 cases in China so far. It happened to be the time that they crossed 42,000 cases in China. That is when they named it COVID-19. Interesting things. Also, another interesting thing, Sandy Hook in Gematria is 112. Another 112. And this shooting happens exactly 11 years and 2 months after the Sandy Hook shooting. 11 years and 59 days. 31 in January, 28 in February. 11 years and 2 months to the day the Gematria value of Sandy Hook is 112. Another 112. Now, I told you I'd talk about it, so let's talk about Sandy Hook just a bit. But really not the event itself, but how it is resurrected today. Today you have this marketing campaign and this organization called Sandy Hook Promise. You may have seen the ads on YouTube. I certainly have seen them. This is an organization where a lot of the parents of the victims of Sandy Hook are part of this, and they are campaigning against guns. In other words, they're advancing an agenda that will turn the world into a terrorist's playground. This Sandy Hook Promise was founded in 2015, but really it's been gaining traction recently. In May 23rd, they onboarded Jonathan Karen as Vice President of Marketing. This guy, Jonathan Karen, was Professor of Marketing for 12 years at Georgia State University in Atlanta. Remember Atlanta? At 5 years, he was the Director of Marketing at Turner Broadcasting Systems in Atlanta, Georgia. Turner is a pretty big company, right? Turner Broadcasting Systems, TBS. And you can see for yourself his accomplishments, and in his words, he brags how he successfully courted younger audiences to network and website via strategic campaigns, targeted media buys, and expansion into the digital arena. He was Chief Marketing Officer at the V Foundation for a year and a half between 2021 and 2023. And the V Foundation is all about cancer research. By the way, he was also Vice President of the Digital Marketing at the American Cancer Society. But the V Foundation's marketing strategy basically consists of parading Stuart Scott around on ESPN. Stuart Scott, who was an incredibly gifted and principled sports presenter who died of cancer. Them really using him and his skill and his value and accomplishments is in itself a distasteful business strategy. But the real problem I have with these cancer foundations is that, and I know this is going off topic a bit, but it's important because these cancer foundations, they ensure that research money goes to the established methods, the chemotherapy and now immunotherapy, which can help treat cancer, but they for damn sure won't cure it. They'll never cure it, and they won't touch the holistic view, and they will stay far as hell away from the principles of health and illness. That is because these foundations are part of an unspoken understanding where money is funneled between government and dominant medical corporations and the prestigious schools, the universities, and the nonprofits. That's why I don't let these cancer commercials pull at my heartstrings. Because the first step at fighting cancer is full disclosure of the toxins and radiation sources that we're exposed to. And that laundry list is covered up by the same network that funds the so-called cancer research. And people like Jonathan Caron, they're the people who are hired to get shit done. These people get shit done. He's incredibly good at what he does. And people say follow the money if you want to learn what is truly happening in the world. And I say follow the money makers, the influencers, the kingmakers, the people behind the scenes who have a record of power and success following them. So he markets for them. Is his marketing successful? I don't know. Let's look at some of the sponsors of the Sandy Hook Promise. Comcast, NBC Universal. Is that a significant corporation? Is that a big company? Meta, that's Facebook. That's a top 5 company in the world. That's a mega company. Bank of America, Citibank, Visa, MasterCard, Raytheon Technologies. These are big corporations, yeah? They're sponsoring them. There's money behind this. And in November of 2022, they hired Jillian King, as senior manager of federal grants, meaning money given by the federal government as a gift. Jill King, she worked 4 years as the grant coordinator of the New York State Office of Mental Health. That's 5 years at Best Self Behavioral Health as well, where she received $40 million in successful grant awards. They themselves state this on their LinkedIn. This is public knowledge. By the way, am I saying that she did a bad thing for getting money for mental health care for teenagers? Absolutely not. I'm just saying she has quite the propensity for getting her hands on government money. And now you got her working on getting government money into lawmakers' pockets to pass gun laws to take away the possibility of individual protection of rights and property. That's why you see the Sandy Hook Promise gaining traction now, because they hired the big guns, right? This is how stuff is done when it's time to build. 2020, 2024, this is when shit is getting done. And Sandy Hook already then resulted in a censorship culture. They got Alex Jones taken off. They got David Icke taken off. Now Elon Musk symbolically puts Alex Jones back on X, right, when it's the time to build. Hey, there's a culmination of all these things. But Sandy Hook already resulted in these gun laws. It was really the catalyst that later, when the Highland Park shooting happened here in my state, around in the Chicagoland area, that resulted in the assault weapons ban that is in effect in my state today. That's Sandy Hook triggering that. Assault weapons bans, and now the Sandy Hook Promise will go further. Trust me, it's going to go further. And I'll leave the Houston shooting there. 3 days later, there was a shooting in Kansas City at the Super Bowl parade on Valentine's Day, February 14th, 3 days later. I talked about the 3. Now, more than 20 people were wounded here. Only one woman died. One woman tragically died, and my heart goes out to her family. She was a mother of 2, which I'll get to. I have to talk about the symbolism. We talked about the Super Bowl connections, right? And while this appeared to be a gang initiation type of shooting, you could see the shooter being tackled. You could see these are kids. It's not your classic shooter scenario. It's certainly connected. The connection is clear. Now, Kansas City, the city that, hey, they happened to win the Super Bowl, right? This was Patrick Mahomes' third Super Bowl. Kansas City is at the intersection of three rivers. You got the Missouri River West, the Missouri River East, and the Kansas River. It's really two rivers, but they make a triangle of sorts, a trinity symbol. And Sandy Hook, when you look at the map, is also near this formation of a triangular shaped river formation, even though it's more like a creek and it may mean nothing. I view this, I look at, the architecture of cities certainly is very real for the occultists. Like, you see all the pentagrams and symbols in Washington, D.C. and other major cities in America, in the Vatican. This one may mean nothing, but it's an interesting connection. Another interesting connection is with this Kansas City shooting. It happened at Union Station. Union Station. I talked all this about the divine union, right? The union of these ancient energies, the getting back together, reuniting the Trinity, restoring the ancient earthly powers. This happened at Union Station, and in the Houston shooting, actually, they had a reunification center nearby. This term reunification center is new. It's really a place where the kids who got lost reunite with their parents. People who, who basically were, they got lost in the chaos. They meet back up. But that's the logistical reason. The symbolic reason for a reunification center is because this is about the Trinity and the divine union and reunification of that divided ancient Eastern power. There's that. Also, the woman killed is Lisa Lopez Galvan. Lisa Galvan was a mother of two, and her last name, Galvan, it comes from the Celtic O Galbane, derived from the words Gael, which means bright, and Ban, which means white, bright white. Now, if you know about my previous stuff, you know that bright white and everything that has to do with a white lady or bright white woman is about the killing of the mother goddess. It is about the killing of the feminine, divine feminine energy. It's about the killing of care. It's about the cremation of care, the destruction of the feminine, really love for the world and love for children. And the white dove is Columbia. Colum means dove in Latin. And you have Columbine, the Columbia shuttle disaster, Virginia Tech. Virginia is the virgin. That's another, reference to the purity of the white lady, of the mother goddess, of the pure force, like a mother's love for her child. Red is the passionate love. That is the love, like romantic love. White is the pure love of a mother for her child. And this is the killing of the goddess, and we see this over and over again. Deaths of mothers, deaths of children. She's the only one who dies in the shooting, just like the mother is the only one who dies in the other shooting, 3 days apart. Now, I'm almost at the end here, and I want to share a personal story here because, well, here's the story. Around 2018, I first was introduced to gematria in 2016 in a funny way through actually the sports world. And around this time, I was learning more about, sacred geometry, some occult stuff, numerology, ancient wisdom, all of this stuff, around 2017. And in around January of 2018, it was about a month before, I was looking into all of the sacrifice events. I didn't know as much. I certainly didn't know about the springtime occult season of sacrifice, but I knew a bit. So I looked at the things that were going on, and I said this actually at the time around January. I said this to my friend. I think I told about 2 people about a month before. I said, texted it, I predict a terrorist attack on February 14th. That was 2018. And a year later, on February 14th, you have the Parkland school shooting. Remember this nutjob guy, the Nicholas Cruz? He shot up a school in Florida. really, I think when people predict things and they get it wrong, I think it's pretty soft and lame. I really don't like to be that guy, but I wish I would have made that louder, right? Really, I didn't have any like big indications of that happening. I just knew of the significance of like the Lupercalia and February 14th, and I just thought that it would happen that year, and it did. That doesn't mean I'm a prophet or a guru or a seer, right? I'm a Polish guy in Chicago who works construction. But when you open your heart and you direct your mind, your body, and your soul to something, you are going to see that the universe is writing your story along with you. You will find yourself connected to events, experiencing synchronicities with people around you, with your loved ones, experiencing miracles even. And as the world descends further into slavery, these are the ways that the infinite love of the universe and the universe's creator, these are the ways that that love appears to us, even when we're so far removed from it. See, these shootings and these deaths and disasters, they're so horrific and meaningless. They're completely pointless and senseless violence. Crazy elaborate. It is crazy that I do a 2-hour show talking about this stuff. But these people have to inject and pervert these ancient stories and connections. They don't have the heart connection. They're disconnected emotionally, and therefore they can never be integrated. Their divine trinity will never be integrated, and they don't have this connection. They have no love. And that is why people do violence. That is why people violate natural law. It is from a lack of love. It is from a lack of understanding of the complete integration of the individual with everyone else. Okay? Your ego, your self, your individual self, highest self, aligned with the highest self of everyone else. That is the divine union of selfishness and selflessness. So, that's them, but the real stories and connections are within us. The force of love is alive, right? We can take this world back. And the way we can do this is to seek the true union. The true union is aligning thoughts, emotions, and actions, and healing the mother, the father, and the child, and building loving families. That's it. That's the big secret. That's how simple it is. And it's 3:14, right now, as I'm saying this on Sunday. 3:14 is pi, 3.14. And that's all about the circle, right? That's the irrational number that lies behind the magic of the circle. And they do this whole thing with squaring the circle, and that is the paradox. Squaring the circle is the ancient Freemasonian of course, question. How do you square the irrational with the rational? Well, there's actually a simple answer. And, you don't need thousands of years of occult traditions and all the work of Steiner and Madame Blavatsky. I have so much respect for those people. But we are in a new time. We stand on the shoulders of giants, and it's pretty simple. It's all about the divine union. That is the irrational and the rational, the masculine and feminine. That is the Justice card and the High Priestess card, truth and law together. You integrate all of this. You integrate the rational, the cold, the selfish. You look at these things like a scientist. Then you look at it with compassion, with the empathy, right? Integrating everything and taking emotions into account. You can do both. You can be both a soft, adorable man who, is harmless as a dove. That's an aspect of what a human being should be, right? Especially for our children. That's your High Priestess card. And then you have the other side, the Justice card, who holds the sword, who will turn emotions off when necessary, and will defend that family like an animal when the time calls for it. You need both. You need both the cold energy and the warm and yielding energy. That's squaring the circle. The answers to all the ancient occult problems are there. The solutions to all the problems in the world are very simple, actually. It was a convoluted episode, but really the solutions are very simple. So, thank you very much for joining me on this episode of This Week in Tyranny. I'll see you next week. And my call to action is start doing this. I need you here. Like, we need to build this family, right? Get involved, because if you're watching this and it speaks to you, you deserve, you are worth it. You need to love yourself enough to know that the Creator loves you, right? The creation itself loves you, and you should be part of this story that the universe will write with you, but it requires your action. And that's why love and will go together. Thank you.
Rappers talk too much shit, can't back it up with lyric. Build your skills,